I have made a grievous error in picking third to go on this. And to make this even more bizarre, it's 39 years ago this month that I stood on this very bema to get bar mitzvahed, so this is a little bit strange. My wife and a few others asked me why. Good, I made it the first line. My wife and a few others asked me why I was going to speak. You don't have to. It's not tradition. It's okay not to. Well, you see, my father had two children, Holly and myself. Holly was the one who attended private schools, received a master's in nursing and a PhD from Harvard. And all of that was so that during my father's last days, she could become Florence Nightingale herself. She attended to every need, administered drugs, did everything. That was her moment in life, and she performed to the highest possible level. My job in life has always been this moment. My father trained me to have his voice, part of his salesmanship, his passion for customer service, and a sense of humor. Whenever we attended a funeral, my father would always hear the priest or rabbi delivering the eulogy. He would always say, "I don't want anyone who doesn't know me intimately to talk about me." He never said it would be me, but it was clear that this was always going to be my moment, my job in life. And although my sister succeeded perfectly in her job, I am going to fail miserably. You see, because my father also gave me his trait of crying. So I will do my best. And it is okay to laugh at this funeral. It's Jack Gelfond. His license plates were Fun E1. Here we go. Jack Gelfond, born Jacob Gelfond, March 27, 1931 in Chicago, Illinois. No middle name. Typical old-time story, almost cliche by now. Born of Russian Jewish immigrant parents, grew up on the west side of Chicago, very poor. Actually living in the back of his parents' fruit market, Dora's Fruit Market. 2 older brothers, 1 older sister. The brothers were bigger and stronger, and the sister was the only girl, so everyone else had a way to get attention. But what about little Jackie? He always told of how his mother had a great sense of humor, and at an early age he found a way to make her laugh, and that was that. He developed the only tool and weapon that he would ever need the rest of his life, his mouth. Never having much interest in school, he became the class clown. He was also voted the best-dressed kid in school. He always had a sense of style, from his two-tone pink car to his Kangol hats and crazy ties and socks. He sold fruit in the store, and his job for life began. There would be company changes, but the job would always remain the same. What can I sell? He didn't go to college. He needed to start selling. So he sold everything. He finally landed in the insurance business, and he honed his gift while making the $1 million round table year after year. In the meantime, my dad did all the great fatherly things you're supposed to do. He took me to my first Cubs, Bulls, and Hawks game. He took me to many, many Bear games. Where he differed as a dad was, he never once said, "It's too cold or snowy to go to the game." Which is probably why today I love winter and I'm never bothered by the crazy conditions. As my mother said, my dad played Santa Claus at Cabrini Green for many years in the 60s and 70s. He had his custom-made suit, and he would go where other Santas wouldn't, and the kids would line up around the block. The stories he would bring home were heartbreaking. Knowing that many of those children would not actually receive what they were asking for, he would always say, "You know, Santa can't always get everything for everybody, but that doesn't mean Santa doesn't love you. I love every child, and maybe next year, if not this year." When Cabrini Green decided to get a black Santa, my father brought his talents to the Walgreens Corporation headquarters in Deerfield, one of his customers. They set up a big day for their employees to meet Santa. He knew that some of the kids in that area didn't actually celebrate Christmas, so he would have his hunches and ask them their name. Steve Goldstein. "Well, Steve, do you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah?" "Hanukkah." "Do you know the prayer over the candles?" "Yes." "Can you say it with me?" "Sure. Now here's Santa Claus singing Baruch Atah Adonai. If you could only see the mouths drop open from the adults standing nearby. Santa knows Hebrew? This one does. My favorite Santa story. We would bring, this one's going to be the hard one. We would bring Jacqueline and Allison to see Santa at Walgreens every year. We knew this particular year might be the last before Jacqueline recognized Grandpa was Santa, so I told him not to talk too much. Impossible task. We were waiting outside the line and Santa entered the room. He spots the girls and walks right over to them, ho-ho-hoing and reaching down to shake Jacqueline's hand. Jacqueline then ran up to me and said, "Santa sounds just like Grandpa." "Thanks, Dad." I said, "Do you know why?" As I tried to think of an answer. I said, "Because this is the real Santa Claus." And the real one can make his voice sound like someone you love. Her eyes lit up and we went home. A few hours later, Grandpa just happened to come over. Jacqueline runs up to him and tells him why she knows she met the real Santa Claus. I'm sure it was one of the happiest moments he ever had on this earth. He also used his mouth to raise money for this very temple. He was in charge of the first auction and the voluntary dues committee, always selling for someone. But my father didn't just use his most powerful weapon, his mouth, for selling. He used it for everything. One time on WGN, my parents saw a story of an elderly man who had dementia and walked away from home. He needed medicine or he would die soon. The very next day, my mother noticed the man walking downtown, and my father approached him and pretended like they were long-lost friends. He was able to hold the man long enough for the police to get there, and they received a plaque for saving his life. But that was easy, and many people would have done the same thing if they recognized the man. My father did what others often wouldn't. He was walking on LaSalle Street, downtown in his suit, and he saw a man yelling and roughing up a woman in broad daylight. Not one passerby was helping. My father immediately started walking across the street with big, deliberate strides right at the man. He opened his wallet and quickly flashed it at him and said, "Get your effing hands off of her." The man instantly dropped his hands and started backpedaling, saying, "I'm not touching her." He berated the man long enough to grab the attention of a police officer and told him to take over. If the man only would have looked closer, he would have seen that my father was probably flashing his JCC membership card. It's all in the presentation, Sales 101. My father walked away without fanfare, proving once again that the only difference between Jack Gelfond and a comic book superhero was that Jack Gelfond actually existed. So my father's been selling insurance for years when a bigger company came calling, the largest service award manufacturer in the U.S. They heard about my father and called him in for an interview. He obviously impressed them, and the final question was, if we hire you, how long do you think it would take for you to get up to speed on our products to compete with the other salesmen? My father immediately answered, "It won't take any time. I'll compete now." They didn't realize that my father never really sold insurance or any other product. He always sold Jack Gelfond. And he had it down pat. Now this conservative Mormon company was probably a little hesitant hiring this brash young Jewish salesman, but they did. And true to his word, his first calendar year with the company, not only did he win Salesman of the Year, beating out the other 29 highly experienced guys, but he set the all-time sales record to that date so far. He went on to win other awards and qualify every single year to the annual sales trip. After a long number of years, the company began to get too controlling and cult-like for my father's taste. The competitors had always courted my father, but he was loyal and he had signed a non-compete clause. A number of other salesmen also wanted out, but only Jack had the nerve to take them on. So he agreed to switch to a competitor and quit his job. It was a very scary time because he knew they would sue to stop him. Now that I have kids, I see how brave that was to do. They sued him and had a 4-day trial in federal court to prevent him from working for 3 years within 250 miles. Devastating if he lost. What they didn't calculate was the person they hired to light up the sales charts was about to eat them alive on the stand. When questioned about the fact that he played Santa Claus for many years at Walgreens, trying to prove that his relationship was so tight, clients would move to his new company, my father simply answered, "Yes, I do, but I heard the competitor's sales guy plays Peter Rabbit at Easter for another company." The judge finally gave a 5-page scathing decision against the company, and my father was free to move. In the next few weeks, a half dozen other guys all left as well. Always the leader, never the follower. And of course, as a follow-up, Walgreens called my father and said, "We don't buy sales awards from XYZ company. We buy them from Jack Gelfond. Where you go, we go." My father would often tell me I was funnier than he was. I gotta take a break. I think half of that was a father encouraging his son, and half he honestly believed because I could make him laugh. He was very wrong, however. You see, I can make people laugh when I'm comfortable with them. But Jack Gelfond could walk into a room filled with strangers who couldn't speak English, and he could make them laugh. He didn't even need to be conscious to make people laugh. My father was having one of his many operations. The doctor was someone he always discussed sports with. So my father is wheeled into the operating room, given the gas, and falls fast asleep. The doctor and staff then pull the gown back to reveal my father's genitals, only to find a note scotch-taped to my father's penis that read, "Bears by 7." Now that's funny. I'm not doing that. He eventually concluded his sales career, but still had too much entertaining left in his mouth, so he became a docent at the Lincoln Park Zoo for 14 years, entertaining school children and foreign visitors. You can only imagine what a show he put on for them, and you can imagine what effect he had by how many people are here wearing their Lincoln Park Zoo outfits. This is the real hard part. But as it turns out, all of it, the sales awards, going from poor to having one of the first Mercedes around, raising money for the temple, playing Santa Claus at Cabrini Green, all of it turned out to be nothing. It was just practice. His warm-up act for the real reason Jack Gelfond was put on this earth. To redefine the word grandpa. You see, before Jacqueline was born, he would always say he never wanted to be called Grandpa or Zadie or Papa. Those were old people names. I'm young and crazy. They can call me Jack. Okay, whatever you say. And then Jacqueline was born, and she took one look at him, and he realized he was Grandpa. He would just redefine what the word means. It wasn't going to mean old guy who pinches your cheeks too hard or sends you big checks on your birthday. You see, it's always been easy to be a very good grandparent. The formula has always been the same. Buy them whatever they want, let them stay up past bedtime, let them eat what their parents won't, and kiss them lots and send them home. And he did all that. But like I said, that's the easy part. So he set new rules. I don't want to babysit every few months. I want to sit every single solitary weekend. My parents canceled concert trips and blew off friends and drove 2 hours round trip if we needed a sitter. When Allison was left home alone some mornings because Gina and Jacqueline had gone to school earlier, Allison would call him at 7 a.m. At first she would pretend to call and say, "What are you doing, Grandpa?" at 7 a.m. My father quickly realized what was going on, and he would sit on the phone for 30 minutes while Allison had the phone on speaker. She would get ready for school and occasionally yell out, "Grandpa, are you there?" Yes, of course he was there. When the girls had a performance at school, they would drive out, the 2-hour round trip. Not just for ones where the girls had an actual part, but for everything. If their girls were in the back of the choir for 2 minutes, they drove the 2 hours, so that whenever the girls looked out, they would see his Kangol hat. He would allow them to destroy the house to foster their creativity, whether it was emptying all the kitchen cabinets to play Dora's Fruit Market or taking out all of Grandma's clothes out of the closet to put on a fashion show. When we would go out to dinner, like all grandchildren, they would hop on Grandpa's lap and ask if they could add sugar and cream and stir his coffee. That was, of course, too boring after a while, so they started pouring too much sugar and too much cream to see his reaction. After a while, it became whatever they could find on the table. So while he pretended to look away, they would add salt and pepper and ketchup and mustard, absolutely anything they could find. And with an evil, delightful grin, they would say, "It's ready, Grandpa." And no matter how vile that coffee was, he would take a real sip. And no matter how fancy the restaurant, he would let out a yell and start gagging. They would giggle and laugh and make that the best sip of coffee he had that week. And when the American Girl store opened its first location just down the block from my parents, it was a grandparents' mecca. Take your granddaughters to the store and buy them the overpriced dolls. And of course, my parents did that. But my father thought if an 18-inch doll can bring this much joy, imagine what they could do with a 6-foot, 220-pound doll. So he became that for them. He said, "Here I am. Use and abuse me to your heart's content." So they would ride him like a pony on the concrete patio. They would put a bowl of water on the floor and he would lap it up like a dog. And sometimes the doctors would say after a particular surgery that you have to take it easy. We would warn the girls not to crawl all over him. Of course, I would turn around and they would be crawling all over him. I would try to stop it, but he would give me a look that said, "Don't even try it." Because he knew better than all of us what kept him alive. When we all thought it was the doctors and nurses and surgeries and drugs and chemo and radiation, it wasn't. It was Jacqueline and Allison and later Lindsay that kept him going. Their uncontrollable laughter was more powerful than any drug, so he soaked up every crazy, funny, tender moment. When we would drop off the girls to go out for a few hours, inevitably we would come back to find my father totally abused. One time he would have 50 Kangol hats stacked up 4 feet high on his head with the girls laughing away. The next time we would find him not only with makeup on, but with permanent marker all over his bald head, scotch tape across his eyes and mouth, and lotion all over his body. The delight and laughter of the girls only fed him more. One time they found an old bottle of self-tanning lotion and put it all over his face and hands. And when his face was blotchy orange for the next few weeks, he didn't stay inside and hide. He proudly walked down Michigan Avenue so he could call them later and yell at them about how crazy he looked. He spoke to the girls almost every single day, not only to make them laugh, but to be their advocate and confidant. I wanted to just read 2 quick excerpts from notes they wrote to him. "Grandpa, where do I begin? Today you're 78 years old, and I am 15. And yet I feel we are closer in age. Maybe that's because I'm so mature and you're so not mature. We have always talked about so much, whether it's politics, the Cubs, current events, or Grey's Anatomy. Because of the great advice I get from you, I have decided that when I'm President of the United States, you can be one of my senior advisors. You are the most amazing grandpa in the world, and I love you so much. Love, your true #1 real favorite, Jacqueline." From Allison. "Dear Grandpa, if there was a Best Grandpa Award, you would win it over and over again. No other grandpa would ever be able to win it with you around. I love you so much. I could not imagine my life without you. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think of how lucky I am to have you in my life. Love always and forever, Allison, the better one." When my father got his first cancer diagnosis, we all thought it was a death sentence, especially 18 years ago. It scared us, and I'm sure it scared him. But 2 minutes later, his big, bold personality took over. You see, the cancer came right as Jacqueline was born. So I think he said, "There is no way on God's green earth that my granddaughter isn't going to know me. So he said, take out my prostate and let's move on. And some years later, he got bladder cancer. And he said, they know me, but they might not remember me after a while. So take out my bladder and let's move on. Then he had quintuple bypass. Not yet. Let's move on. Then a few years later, kidney cancer. And he said, I'm not quite done with them yet. Just a little more time. And anyway, I have 2 kidneys, so take one out and let's move on. And then the final cancer. And there was no more of him to take out. He gave everything he had. He lived 21 years past the average life expectancy in 1931. And that was with 4 cancers, heart surgery, and a mother who fed him sandwiches made with schmaltz, pure lard. But now the girls weren't just girls anymore. They were young ladies. They've already shown him accomplishments to be proud of, and they clearly were old enough now that they would never forget him. So he said, okay, God, you can have me now. But it's on my terms and my timeline. He waited 12 minutes after his 80th birthday was over, and he died peacefully. During his last hours, we sat around listening to Frank Sinatra CDs, and at one point, My Way came on. After some of the lyrics, we looked around and said, are you hearing this? The lyrics fit perfectly at the moment. After he passed away and was taken away, I drove back to my house at 3:30 in the morning. I had the radio on, and as I got off the highway near my house, My Way came on the radio. As Frank Sinatra held the last line, I did it my way. I pulled into my driveway. Almost like some old-time corny movie. It's like my father was saying, how's that for an exit? Pretty damn good. Now, I can't end Jack Gelfond's eulogy on a sad note, because he wouldn't want that. So I have one final story. Early to mid-1970s at a high-end resort in Mexico on the company annual trip. A bunch of the salesmen and their wives are hanging around the pool along with many other hotel guests. My father goes in the pool with one of those long, narrow rafts to lie on. He tries to get up on the raft, and as we have all experienced, flipped right over to the other side. He tried a few times and realized that some of the sales guys are laughing, thinking he's putting them on. Of course, he starts exaggerating the attempts and is flopping around in the water to the delight of the crowd. Needing to push the envelope a little further, he puts his hands down under the water and slips his bathing suit down past the crack of his rear end. He jumps up and lands on the raft. He acts as if he doesn't know he's exposed, and the crowd grows louder. Being fed by the laughter, he pushes one last bit and slowly moves his hands under the water, so he slowly floats over to the wife of the owner of the company. The Mormon-owned, conservative, don't drink, don't smoke, don't swear company. All the while pretending while he's asleep on the raft. When he comes right up upon her, she finally notices and screams, "Get him away!" The sales guys are now in stitches. One of them grabs a camera and takes a picture. The next year, that man returned with a t-shirt with my father's rear end exposed on the raft with the caption, "Nobody does it better." And in case you think I'm making this up or exaggerating about how far down he pulled his suit, nearly 40 years later, here's that t-shirt. Now, I'm sure nobody ever has had their rear end fully exposed at their own funeral. My father would be thrilled to know he was the first. Nobody does it better. My point exactly. I love you, Dad.